Hello, everyone. So usually, Karen and I meet either at her office at the Harvard Business School or my office at the MIT Innovation Initiative. But today we're meeting here. What a pleasure.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you, the Fundación Rafael del Pino, to give us this incredible opportunity to discuss Karen's work and a fantastic book, FinTech, Small Business, and the American Dream. I enjoy reading the book very much, especially because I learned a lot about how this new technology in FinTech can really transform the loans that we offer to small businesses that you have shown us are the engines of growth, not only in the US, but also here in Spain, right? So my question for you, as I was reading the book in detail, very engaged, thought, wow, this is a very ambitious book. So what has been the main challenge in writing this book?
Well, the challenge, I always thought that I would never write a book. I'm not really a writer, I'm a numbers person. But this change that I saw happening was so compelling that I really felt pushed to see if I could capture some of it and communicate it. The problem is the change is happening so rapidly. I went to on book tour in April, and I thought of this idea of small business utopia when I was writing the book maybe a year ago. So I go to Silicon Valley and I describe this idea, and I'm in Square, Square, the payment systems. I'm in their headquarters, and they say to me, let me introduce you to the 3 people who are working already on this dashboard. And I thought, oh dear, the book will be outdated before anybody reads it. But I think the way the industry is changing, it was a real effort to not make it just a story of the businesses, but a story of the bigger way that artificial intelligence can change an industry that is fundamental and old, but and important, but now poised for something new.
So you mentioned the challenges in writing this book as the technology is moving so fast in such a short period of time. What was the most rewarding part of writing the book?
Oh, the most rewarding part. Well, being invited to Madrid. I do think, and I'm not kidding, that's been very rewarding. And I was in Japan actually 3 weeks ago. We're going to Copenhagen, where Mercedes is a professor at the business school. I've been all over London. I've been back in Washington. And to me, I feel like, you can probably tell, I feel like I'm back on a mission for small businesses. The great reward of public service was feeling that you had a way to make a difference in your country and maybe amongst an important constituency. And I feel a little bit more, particularly with the regulators now, that I've got some pushing to do for this important group that doesn't always have a voice.
So indeed, in your book, you offer many recommendations for different stakeholders to build a healthy financial ecosystem, FinTech ecosystem. So what I wanted, in order to get this, what you call the small business utopia. So what I would like to do is to go through each of those stakeholders and ask you some questions about what recommendations you have for them. And I'm going to start with the FinTech startups. So what is your advice for them to benefit and appropriate the innovations that they're developing? Should they compete against the banks? Should they collaborate with the banks? What is the advice for them?
I think fintechs and banks need to collaborate. I think fintechs have, the concept of challenger banks is great, and I'm happy they're trying, but I think the obstacles are great. So on the other hand, I think there's a lot of success to be had in providing the infrastructure in collaboration with banks. And banks need the help. They can't invent all the new applications on their own because they're too traditional. They don't understand customer service. They can't get their systems to talk to each other. So collaboration, I think, is the key to success.
So do you think the banks have been disrupted?
The banks have a very long dispersion of readiness. Some banks, I mean, you really have to credit your banks here. BBVA was an innovator back when I was at the SBA. Santander is quite active already with fintechs. There are other banks who are resisting and just saying, you know, they're not really going to be successful. I'm just going to stick to my business. So I think banks have to engage. But sometimes, I think JP Morgan, to be honest with you, is spending too much money, not smartly enough. So I think they have to be a little bit more sharply focused on the outcomes they're trying to achieve.
So we discussed startups and the banks. Let's now talk about the government. So the book really captured your experience and expertise as the head of the Small Business Administration, and you spent quite a bit of time thinking about what could be the right regulation to really promote this fintech utopia, right? And you discussed in your presentation that Europe got a good grade because they have done open banking. US is behind, but do you have some example of good regulation implemented in the US in fintech?
So there's an example in the book. How many of you can deposit your checks by taking a picture of them? Does that exist? Yeah. So it used to be that you always had to have a physical check. And if the physical check didn't exist, you couldn't have a transaction. Well, in the US, they finally created a, you all right in your?
Yes, is that I think some people are communicating that they cannot hear us. It's okay? Yes? Okay.
All right, good.
Sorry.
You have to hear Mercedes. She says important things.
No.
All right. But we passed a regulation, and I tell this story in the book because even though people had the technology that you could deposit your check mobily, it wasn't allowed. And they made one small change in the regulation, and it completely transformed how we do mobile banking. So I think there are examples of when regulation can work if it is clear and concise. It can make a big difference.
Now, also in the book, you mentioned that very early on, after the financial crisis, there actually was a very good piece of regulation asking the banks and all the stakeholders to collect real-time data about all the loans that were given to the small businesses. So a fantastic piece of regulation, sooner than the open banking in Europe, but it has not been implemented. So the regulation was passed, not implemented. Why do you think the implementation has failed so far?
So I should know that Mercedes, who is an expert in data, would ask me about this. This is a sore subject and a hot button with me, and I do write about it in the book. In the United States, we do not collect any data on small business lending originations. And you think, well, that can't be true. We do not know how many small businesses got a loan last year in the United States. We just don't know. So I had this problem as the head of the SBA of going into a financial crisis. We call it flying blind. You know, you had no idea whether you were making any improvement. Well, I decided that part of the Dodd-Frank, if you've heard of the Dodd-Frank financial regulation, we put a whole package of regulations together, and I stuck a provision in there, Section 1071, that we had to collect this data so that we would know. It has not been implemented because the banks are resisting. And the banks are annoyed because there were a lot of regulations. And so this one has not been done, and I have been making a big fuss about it to pretty much no success. So we will see. But I don't understand how we cannot collect this data. The UK collects the data. I'm sure you all collect the data. I'm at a loss.
So the role of universities, is there a role for universities to have a healthy fintech ecosystem?
Well, there certainly is, Mercedes and I now are at universities, so of course we have to say there's a role for universities. I think that in all innovation, there's a role. There certainly is, as we look at the data science and we try to see about the algorithms, this is brand new territory. I also think that universities and gatherings like this have an important role in reconciling this question about data and data privacy and discrimination in data. We're going to have to make some decisions about this new world we're going to live in. And they need to be made by people who are quite thoughtful, as opposed to by people who think, what is the politically expedient answer to this question? Because we are going to be living in this world for a long time. China has made this decision that they think it's fine to have a social index, an indicator, and it's not clear to me that we won't actually have one ourselves. We just won't, it will just live in Amazon. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to be proactive, and universities are where freedom of thought is supposed to occur and intellectual rigor, and I think they have a role to play.
So in a way, if I hear you well, universities can avoid this dark side of AI.
I think it's all of our personal responsibilities, but I think universities can be intellectually leaders.
I have one more stakeholder, right, for the whole ecosystem, and that's the hat that you have. So now we're going to talk about the venture capitalists. As a venture capitalist, what are the type of fintech firms that you will invest on, and which ones you want?
Well, if I had to vote in the vote you took, I like the banks, but I love the fintech infrastructure players. So I'll tell you about a company called Plaid. Plaid, like the clothes or plaid, but what it does is it makes the data pipes. It takes the API, it takes the data out from the banks, and any application that wants to use bank data can get that data from Plaid with your permission. And so that's an example of a company I wish I had invested in, because I think it's already a unicorn.
So, will you invest on blockchain?
So, blockchain, fintech has a lot of parts. It has cryptocurrency and blockchain, and I only talk about a very tiny part, small business lending. There's payments. And my personal opinion about blockchain is that it's a magical product and idea, but we call it a solution in search of a problem. That we don't really know how blockchain is going to get implemented. And I am not a fan on the cryptocurrency part at all, for reasons that we could go on and on about. So I don't do a lot in blockchain. Nice, elegant. To have a ledger that is immutable, nobody can change it, what a great idea. The best application for blockchain is in the country of Georgia. There's a case on this at Harvard Business School. They are using it to record land deeds, because there was corruption in the government, and you might think you paid for a piece of land, but the records of that would be changed. Well, in the blockchain, it can't be changed.
So, all right, I hear you, Karen, not investment on blockchain.
Not from me.
But you will invest in the firms that are developing this data infrastructure that is needed for fintech, but also for other AI applications. Now I'm going to change a little bit direction. So a big part of your, the book and also your presentation is that you explained to us that part of the challenge in fintech, but also part of the opportunity, is that these small businesses are very heterogeneous, right? And you separated them in different types. You separated the main street, the restaurants. You then separated also the suppliers that we've been working on them for a while. So I want to ask you about the suppliers. But let me first clarify a little bit, what do we mean with suppliers? So these are going to be businesses that are producing inputs that are sold to other businesses or the government. These inputs used to be goods, like semiconductor is an input, but in today's economy, more and more these inputs are services. They can be cloud computing services, engineering, design, logistical services, environmental services, and so on. What we found in our work, and we call these suppliers the supply chain economy, is that we actually spend a lot of time working together. I think now it's over 3 years, trying to quantify who are the suppliers in today's economy in the US. And we came up with the numbers. We both like numbers, in addition to frameworks and theory. And it was, to our surprise, a very big part of the US economy, 43% of all the jobs, that's 53 million jobs. They concentrate most of the innovations in terms of patenting, but also in terms of science and technology jobs. They have the highest wages, and they are growing. So here we have the jobs of the future in the supply chain economy. But what it was really a surprise to us is that the part of the suppliers that was hidden from view, that is the most important for innovation and for jobs, are the suppliers of services, financial services, the cloud computing, the design services, right? So my question for you, given how important we know this part of the economy is, what can fintech do to support the supply chain economy, and in particular, the supply chain services?
So Mercedes being modest, because this is a problem. The problem of quantifying the supply chain economy is one that troubled me when I was running the Small Business Administration. I had responsibility for government procurement for small businesses, which is a very powerful tool. But we could never figure out how big this piece of the economy is. And Mercedes is a quantitative genius with data, and we have cracked this code. So now comes the problem, okay, now we've found out that many of these are service businesses. It's very hard to finance a service business because it's dependent on cash flow. You don't have goods and machines that you can pledge as collateral. So once again, fintech showing cash flows could have an enormous benefit. The other side of supply chain businesses is that they are very dependent on when their customers pay. Mm-hmm. So customers pay late, often, especially the government. Yes, I see some nods of people. And if they pay late, it can be a life or death situation for the business. I realized this, and I will tell you one quick story. I was traveling with President Obama into Iowa. Iowa, you probably know because it's the place we have the first caucuses for the presidential. But we were not on a political trip. We were there to talk to small businesses. I don't know why we picked Iowa. But we were in a rural area, in a table, and there was a small business owner who was very mad. And he said to Mr. President, I own a small business, I work on government contracts, and I have not been paid in 1 year. And my business is suffering, my bank will not lend to me, and I don't understand why you won't pay your bills. So of course, the president says, Karen, that question is for you. And I say something which was not very adequate. And we're walking out of the room, and the president says to me, you know, Karen, we have to solve this problem for small businesses getting paid. And I said, yes, Mr. President, I have an idea, which I didn't, but, you know, I'm thinking on my feet. I said, what if we paid all the small businesses quickly? Like, instead of 30 days, we pay them in 20 days. Now I'm figuring we're going to catch all these late payers and we're going to make them pay in 20 days. That's a big win. So the president looks at me and I said, and we'll call it quick pay, thinking on my feet. He leaves the room. I get a call next day. He goes on the bus. He goes on his bus tour, and I get a call from his deputy chief of staff who's traveling with him. And she says, Karen, the president likes your idea. Well, by this time, I've forgotten. What idea? He likes quick pay. Oh, but he wants to change your idea. No problem. He's the president. What does he want? He wants to change the number of days to 15, because then we will cut the payments in half from 30 days to 15. I said, no problem, I can do that. So we go, and sure enough, when the president says we're going to do this, all the agencies get a directive, and we cut our payments to 15 days. Now we're in the White House, and we're going to announce this in that same room, in the Roosevelt room, sitting next to the president, and the White House press corps comes in with those microphones, and they say, Mr. President, we don't understand this program. Are you going to pay the small businesses more money? Well, no, I'm not. So you're just going to pay them 15 days sooner, the same amount of money? Yes. Well, we don't understand why that does anybody any good. Now, I tell this story, and small business owners, they all laugh, because they know that 15 days earlier pay is like 15 days loan from the bank, free, for money. And now I'm in a real panic, because I have to look at the president, and he's got to explain cash flow, income statement, balance sheet to the White House press corps in a soundbite. But he did. And what he said, of course, is what you know, that this would give more capital to small businesses who were having trouble in the financial crisis getting money. The last part of the story I'm very proud of, because I came to Harvard Business School afterwards, and one of our colleagues, who's an economist, said, I'm looking for disruptions that I can study as an economist. And I said, I have one, quick pay. I got him all the data from the Department of Defense, and sure enough, he has a graph that proved we actually did take 30 days down to 15, which I'm relieved that we did it. And he has another 2 years of data it took him to figure out we actually increased for the small businesses who took quick pay, they hired more people, they recovered faster from the recession, and they got more sales. So I believe that if we can do something that gets more capital into the hands of these supplier businesses, insulates them from slow pay, that we can have a meaningful impact on the economy. Sorry, that was a long story.
It's a fantastic story. Is that a lesson for Spain?
Well, I do think it's a lesson for Spain, because I did some research in preparation for this, and I looked at the EU report card on small business for Spain. And one of the places that Spain does not get the best grades is in quick payment. Yeah.
So we need a quick pay.
So I think we need quick pay.
All right. So before I open it up to the public, that I'm sure they're going to have wonderful and very engaging question, I wanted to end it up with one final question. And the question is that it's obvious that you are a very successful businesswoman. You've been a very successful venture capitalist and a very successful policymaker. So what is your advice for women in Spain that want to be part of the fintech revolution?
Well, you have some extraordinary women economists from Spain, I already know. You're asking two of us here who clearly believe that women have powers that and can have power and success. But I do think in Spain, you may not be taking full advantage of all the talent that you have. And if you are a woman here in Spain, be bold. Go into fintech. There is just fantastic opportunity. And if you're a venture capitalist here in Spain, back those women. There is just tremendous opportunity in women-owned businesses, and for banks and for venture capitalists, because they have been underserved and underappreciated in general as a category. And if you look hard where there is and create a diverse portfolio, trust me, you will find great riches.
So I think with that, this is a great way to wrap up. And thank you, Karen Mills, for a fantastic presentation and helping us understand that we indeed could build this small business utopia with the help also of your work. So thank you, Karen, and thank you, Fundación Rafael del Pino, for hosting us today. And thank you, all of you.
Thank you.